The wrath of the gods are back once again to lay claim to their relevancy in the new Netflix series, Kaos. Being Greek myself, I was actually quite excited when this came out, and none other than the man himself, Jeff Goldblum, acting as Zeus, this definitely caught my eye. So my friends, do we have a blockbuster, a 50-50, or a flopbuster on our hands? Kaos takes us into a world where ancient Greek gods and mythological figures are reimagined in a darkly comedic modern setting. Jeff Goldblum plays Zeus, the king of the gods, but with a twist. He's not exactly the all-powerful ruler that we know. The show blends mythology with modern-day issues, making for a wild, unpredictable ride through the lives of gods and mortals alike. The main conflict revolves around the gods' attempts to maintain control over their immortal realm and the mortal realm, while humans begin to challenge the status quo. Zeus is paranoid about losing his power, and the other gods have their own agendas. Meanwhile, the mortals, caught in the middle, start to question the authority of the gods. This power struggle leads to comedic, dramatic, and sometimes absurd situations. As the season builds a climax, the balance of power starts to shift. Zeus, driven by fear and paranoia, starts making desperate decisions that only escalate the chaos. The other gods begin to reveal their true colours, and alliances start to fall apart. In the end, the mortals, armed with the new knowledge about the gods' vulnerabilities, begin to rise up. While some questions are resolved, many threads are left hanging, teasing even bigger conflicts to come into the next season. The gods' reign might be slipping, and the stage is set for a reckoning. We're getting 8 episodes that are made up of 50 minutes in length, so it can feel pretty lengthy, but Binge Watcher managed to watch it all within an evening. The plot and storyline was a pretty bold concept by Netflix. I found it to be quite an interesting concept design. You're getting the dark side of the gods, which was giving me that Prime Video's vibes of The Boys.
Vibes, really. Vibes.
And if you couple that in with such a brilliant cast that they had for this show, and especially as we're seeing the end of a lot of Netflix shows that have been quite a big hit,
cancelled,
it added quite a lot of quality to the show. When it comes to the critiques, I would say that it did feel quite slow, and it also felt quite aggressive in its introduction to the high volume of characters. In the beginning, the show is setting out its stall. It's developing its story, it's introducing characters, some are developing more than others, which is fine. But what happens is, because the characters are so intertwined with the story, it felt for me that it had a direct impact on the story's development. I mean, there wasn't really anything happening up until the point that you get to episode 5.
2,000 years later, 6.5 hours later, a few inches later.
I mean, in all fairness, we do get brought into the fold with the whole prophecy that's the real driving force behind the story in the show, but we don't really see anything tangible happen until we reach episode 5. For me, I just think that this would have been okay if there was a little bit more factored in. You know, if we had seen more action instead of them leaving it so late within the show. The development with some of the characters had question marks over their head for me because they weren't built out enough. And I started to feel a little bit disconnected in that sort of blip period after episode 1 and up until episode 5, because it just felt like it was dragging on until we had actually seen anything actually start to occur. I mean, you have to remember there are 8 episodes in this show. The show stars Jeff Goldblum as Zeus, Killian Scott as Orpheus, Janet McTeer as Hera, Nabam Rizwan as Dionysus, Stephen Dillion as Prometheus, David Thewlis as Hades, Reiki Ayala as Persephone, Missia Butler as Caeneus, Layla Faizad as Ariadne, Stanley Townsend as Minos, Debbie Mazar as Medusa, and Cliff Curtis as Poseidon. Now, when it comes to the standout performances and character development in the show, I think it's a great interpretation towards the stereotypes associated to the gods. Selfish, driving their own agendas, power hungry, authority, deception, to name a few characteristics.
Characteristically unwell.
Now, my top picks for the standout ones to watch are Zeus, Dionysus, Prometheus, and Hades. Zeus undergoes some very interesting development in this show. The story is all centered around a prophecy that could bring about his downfall. It's interesting because the more the show progresses, the more and more we see Zeus's vulnerability and paranoia take effect, with him thinking that there is ultimately a ploy that is starting to present itself more and more to overthrow him. While the gods that are closest to him are showcasing their concerns for him, he slowly learns of their betrayal that vary in different ways, but he is soon brought into the fold of these betrayals, which see him lose control and ultimately putting his foot down to re-establish his authority. I thought this was a really exciting portrayal, coupled with an interesting storyline, so they complement each other nicely. What I would say is that I would have probably wanted to see a little bit more of Zeus's wrath being displayed. I mean, he does have to deal with a lot from those who are closest to him, which would make anyone lose it, and he's the king of the gods. Prometheus is a weirdly interesting one, because he's providing the narration for the entirety of this show, as well as having a key role to play in the latter stages of it. Prometheus' first introduction to the show is that we are seeing him chained up to the side of a cliff face. Through multiple encounters in this show, we're seeing Zeus summon him to get advice and send him back.
I'm sending you back.
What we do get clarity on is that Zeus, more often than not, states that Prometheus is his best friend. This is someone that he trusts in any time of major need. For the most part of the show, we're seeing this weird interaction between Zeus and Prometheus, and the only interaction that we're getting between the two of them is whenever Zeus summons him. Now, the issue here is that we don't actually know why he's been chained to the side of a cliff face, other than he has betrayed Zeus. But we don't get the clarity on what exactly he's done to deserve that exile and punishment. The only inkling that we have is that it has something to do with this prophecy. It's an interesting turn of events in the final episodes of the show, because we see Prometheus break free of his punishment. Interestingly, it isn't Zeus that sets him free, and that's what will be intriguing to see in season 2 if Netflix decides not to cancel it. When I think of Prometheus's role in the show, he didn't have much of a part to play until the end, but I like this hybrid role. Whenever you watch a movie like Troy or Alexander the Great, you have a narrator that guides you in the opening and the closing of the movie, which was what I thought the show had done really well. But they added to it, which was great to see, because he has a pivotal role that's executed towards the end. When it comes to Hades, I would class him as the doer for Zeus's operations in maintaining power and control. We're first introduced to Hades in his natural habitat of the underworld, where he's maintaining his leadership and responsibilities by ferrying souls that have died through what they're calling the frame. Now, for context, when you die, you're buried with this special golden coin that's placed in your mouth.
A golden coin!
If you have this coin, you can ferry through the frame. If you don't have this coin, you cannot ferry through the frame. And what will happen is you end up getting a job of what they call a diver, which is to help those swim through the frame. And you have to do this for all eternity. Now, this operation is all a bit of smoke and mirrors, because actually, when you pass through the frame, you're not going into a better life or what they're calling renewal. You're actually having your energy sucked out of you, and that energy is being fed up into Olympus, which the gods are being powered by. And this is all under threat from this prophecy. Now, Hades is starting to realize that something needs to change, because there's a massive overflow that's starting to happen. But when he goes to inform Zeus and make him aware of this situation, because Zeus is going through that paranoia, and this could be the tipping point that sets them over the edge to give rise to this prophecy, he ends up just punishing him. The overflow doesn't just leave Zeus vulnerable, but it leaves all the gods vulnerable. It's just that Zeus has more to lose. So Hades decides to take it upon himself to try and fix the issue. I'm not going to lie here, I was expecting to see a little bit more from this character, given the fact that it's Hades. I thought they had a brilliant actor, but I just felt like they didn't really capitalise on that much. Now, that's not to take anything away from David Thewlis, as I thought he was still great, but I thought there just could have been a little bit more that the show could have explored with him and his character. Now, that leaves my chosen standout one to watch out of the ones to watch being Dionysus. Dionysus is on an interesting journey in this show. We see him really want to do and be more, as he comes across as if he has a point to prove to his father Zeus. The challenge for Dionysus is that Zeus just can't take him seriously, which suggests that he'll never be seen as more than just the god of pleasure, madness, and wild frenzy. He soon somewhat comes to terms with this, And his journey then shifts towards him exploring his identity, which sees his path then intertwined with Orpheus's as he takes it upon himself to help Orpheus with his mission in the story. For me, there's a sense of sympathy and satisfaction for Dionysus. Sympathy as he won't ever be more in Zeus's eyes, and satisfaction because of the path he finds himself on, which breaks away from the perceived stereotypes surrounding the gods in the show, and actually move towards more of an empathetic god. I personally really like this character and the portrayal because there's a combination of different emotions that is incorporated into his performance, which allows you to build more of a connection with him. When it comes to the visuals, I really loved the three clear distinctions that had been made. Black and white, which focuses on the underworld, gloomy tones of colour, which focuses on Earth and the humans, and then you've got this high quality theme of colour that focuses on the gods and Olympus. I also thought that the costumes and outfits in the show really did run in parallel to this, because you had Hades, who when he comes up to Olympus is wearing a tux and it's black and white. You've got the humans who dress somewhat fashionably, but that vintage attire. And then you've got the gods of Olympus that are wearing high quality designer brands with vibrant colours. I thought this really brought differentiation with what the show was trying to emphasise around status, station, with regards to the dead, humans and the gods. With the cinematography, what really stood out to me the most was in scenes where there's blurred out backgrounds and that individual that is in focus, because it really emphasized and focused the scene on that individual that the story is trying to focus our attention on, which provided more tension and intensity in those scenes that it was executed in. I thought this was really clever because it really focuses you as the audience and your attention on what the story in this scene particularly wants to bring to your attention. When it comes to the entertainment value, I think that Kaos has kicked things off in a really unique way, bringing that blend of humour and mythology, which actually makes for a really good viewing experience, and it makes it something fresh and new added into Netflix. The biggest challenge with the show is that it kicks things off well, but then nothing really happens until you get to episode 5, and then things start picking up again. I also think that you're thrown around a little bit with its aggressive introduction to new characters, and in areas of scene changes. Overall, I would say that Kaos has the makings of a great show. There's no question that they have a great cast, and they have a really intriguing story that balances a blend of different genres. Netflix just need to make sure that they don't cancel this one.
Cancelled?
I give season 1 of Kaos a 3 out of 5 buckets, meaning it's a binge-watching 50-50. So here's a question. If you were to be a god, which god would you be? And you can't pick the obvious one being Zeus. If I was to answer it, I'd probably go with Poseidon. But let me know who you would be down in the comments below. As always, don't forget to smash a like if you enjoyed, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and follow us on social media to stay up to date with the latest content. If you like what you've seen here and you want to see more, click right here to see more. I'm Matthew, this is Binge Watcher. Thanks for binging with me.